Hey, and welcome to the Difference Maker Revolution podcast. And this week, you have Steve, Brad, Jonathan, and myself. And we're here to talk about the silent recession. This sounds like a secret, guys, and yet we're talking about it. Like, what is a silent recession?
Do you want the technical term or the non-technical term or the...
I'd never heard of it before, and in fairness, I didn't come up with it. I read it in someone's email. So, like, just all things. And they were talking about the silent recession. And I went, yeah, I'm seeing that everywhere, but I never gave it that term before. So,
yeah, it's actually a term. I thought it too was nonsense. A silent recession is where you're not technically in a recession, but it feels like a recession. So businesses and consumers still feel struggles financially, but technically we're not in a recession.
So before we go there, right, and before we talk about the silent recession and how you can thrive through it and come out the other side and build on from there, is it a silent recession because the government don't want to tell us that we're in recession yet and they're sort of hiding the truth? Or is there another definition on that, Brad? Just so.
Oh, I mean, that's a fantastic question, Ronan. We can have the podcast just based on that. But I mean, the technical definition, or the definition that I've always believed a recession to be, is 2 consecutive quarters with negative growth, with negative GDP growth. The US actually had that in 2022. But then they changed the definition of what recession was and said they weren't in a recession. So it's a bit of both. I've always believed, if you look at data, generally you're in a recession when the economy slows and regresses. It doesn't grow. It doesn't move forward. Now we're in this odd period where we are noticing this slowdown, but the economy is still growing, but that it's growing in sectors that probably aren't directly felt by us, you know. And I can talk an awful lot about quantitative easing and printing money.
I won't. We're not going there.
I won't go down that rabbit hole.
But all our problems, just print more money.
But yes, so we feel like we're in a recession with increased inflation, increased interest rates, and decreasing consumer spending. Because essentially everything's gotten more expensive, and income hasn't risen. The income's kind of still the same. So you, as consumers, we're feeling that pinch. But technically, we've not had those 2 quarters of negative growth.
Okay. So what we're saying then, a silent recession is where government and the media are not talking about it because we haven't had 2 quarters of negative growth. So officially we're not, but there's signs everywhere that, you know, that consumers are becoming, what's the word I'm looking for, more careful about how they're spending their money and considering tightening their belts a little bit and putting their hand on their wallet. That we're seeing signs of that, not just in the photography industry, but in other industries are talking about it, right?
Yeah, and you know, in the UK, we had, you know, the cost of living crisis get thrown around an awful lot in the last few years. You know, with the increase in inflation, and at the same time, increased energy bills. So that was felt, and I suppose this is just a continuation of that, or of consumers not having the same level of disposable income that they used to have.
What we do know is that employment is nearly at an all-time high, which means that people have jobs and have money.
Yeah.
All right. So how can we thrive through this silent recession knowing that people have money, right, but are just being more discerning about how they're spending their money, or maybe they're putting more of their money into savings rather than spending it? So, Steve, as a photography business, like, what can we do and what should we do, knowing that consumers are in that state of mind where they are being more protective with their money and they're maybe considering more, what do we spend our money on, and how much do we spend, and how much do we save rather than spending, and where we are with all of that. That's a big, long question, I know.
Yeah, now I need to contemplate that one. If the last recession has any sort of implications, it seemed that people diverted their money more towards experiences and making themselves feel good, more so than spending money on materialistic stuff. The last recession, I think what a lot of people made the mistake of doing is they pulled back on their marketing. And so in the last recession, we upped our marketing in anticipation of it. And we found that people were searching for something that gave them a great experience. So I think whenever people do have that doubt and are holding on to their money, they'll spend it if they feel as though this is going to make them feel better about whatever's happening in the world. And that's possibly what they're going to be looking for. So increasing the level of experience that you're giving your clients and really marketing towards the experience and how this is going to help them feel better is one way that you can charge through this. The other thing is that we need, and this is for every business, we need to be building long-term relationships with our customers and with our third-party alliances. And so when we are working with other businesses that are targeting the same type of customers we are, aligning, working together more closely is also going to help with coming up with marketing ideas and cross-promoting. Really helped us in the last one.
I think that's something that a lot of businesses tend to do in a recession is they'll pull back on marketing and advertising spend. When in reality, yes, you have to get leaner. You have to look for opportunities to cut your operational expenses. You don't need new lights. You don't need a new camera. That's not going to bring you new clients. So cut out all the unnecessary spending, do an analysis of where you're spending your money operationally, and do not decrease your marketing and advertising. You need to do more of it. And you'll probably realistically have to work a little harder. It might be a little bit more challenging to get in touch with people on the phone. So instead of calling them 4 or 5 times before you get through to them, you might have to try 7, 8, 9 times and be more persistent. Like, nobody wants to work harder, but the reality is, if you want to build a good business, you're going to have to take your thumb out and put in the work. It's not magic. We've heard the story many times of Elon Musk sleeping on the floor of, was it SpaceX or one of his other ventures?
Tesla, during the period that he called was production hell, were his words for it. So they were really struggling to get the Teslas made on time and everything else. And yeah, he literally went in and spent weeks and weeks and weeks sleeping on the floor of the factory to sort out the problem.
And I feel like sometimes photographers can come in with an attitude of, oh, well, my client should be booking me. They should want this. They have to do all the hard work. The reality is it's the complete opposite. And in a recession, you're going to have to work a little bit harder. You're going to have to help your clients see their value in having this experience.
It's also about customer service. I think a lot of what you're talking about is upping the level of customer service that we offer clients and take ownership of some of the steps that they were expecting them to do, and really increasing the level of service and attention that we give them, because people value that and they're looking more closely at the level of service they are receiving for the money that they're prepared to spend.
And I think that because there's going to be less people advertising, traditionally, especially when COVID hit, because people pulled their advertising budget, it's kind of like you saw similar trends to a recession. The return on investment from advertising dramatically increased, and the cost of advertising decreased dramatically because there are less people doing it. So especially if you're running Facebook ads, your costs are likely to go down because there's going to be less advertisers in the field.
So Brad, this idea of spending more on your marketing, whether that's time or money or both, right? And working harder. That's a difficult thing to do when you feel that you're in a recession and you get into a negative mindset and you start to think about, my clients, they're not going to spend anyway, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like how do you put yourself and the people you work with into a position where we're going to do this, we're going to spend a bit more on our marketing, or we're going to spend some more time on our marketing, or we're going to put some more effort in? How do you actually manage to achieve that?
I suppose that's a really great question, isn't it? Because I technically I've not operated a business through a recession. My parents operated a business through the last recession, and I was aware enough that a recession was happening. It's those memes, your parents fighting really hard to keep the business going and paying the mortgage, and I'm upstairs playing, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 or something, blissfully unaware of what's happening, having the time of my life.
Flaunting his youth again.
What was that, Steve?
Flaunting your youth again, Bradley.
I know, yeah. but I remember my parents' work ethic. I mean, my parents' work ethic is legendary anyway, but I remember they worked more. I remember their work ethic kicked up, and they did more. They marketed more. They spent time on that, and I'm quite fortunate that my parents always had. It's funny, isn't it? Because they are quite pessimistic, especially my father. But you can't flaunt his work ethic. He might be pessimist, but he goes to work, 12 hours plus a day to get through his storm or sort his problem out, and that's what they did all the time. They upped their workload. And it's like what Jonathan said earlier, and I always laugh at it, but we have a load of members, and ultimately a lot of their problems in business would be solved if they just worked a bit more. And that's it. And I suppose it's having that willingness to go out and do more to get. And it's an interesting mentality because you're doing more to earn less. But at the studio at the time, we did revenue dropped £1,000 a week. So we dropped like £50,000 worth of revenue during that 2008 recession. And my parents' work ethic doubled to essentially lose 50 grand or lose 50 grand of revenue. We still made profit. My dad still ran a profitable business during those years. But it requires work and different marketing strategies. So we were doing all types of stuff. It was Facebook didn't exist. I don't think Facebook was born then. I think Facebook came about in 2012. But we were doing a serious amount of stands and exhibitions and door-to-door mailings and just a lot of marketing activity to get working. And really spending time on marketing. They were my weekends. My Saturdays I got shipped off to my grandparents, and I had a wonderful time. Because my parents were working. My parents were off on the stands and generating leads and then calling those leads and getting bookings in. And now your question about mindset is interesting because I was around and in the business during COVID. And those first few months of COVID, I suppose I front ran a lot of those emotions because I was like, oh, look what's happening in Italy. Well, that's going to happen here. But when it happened here and came on the news, I still remember going upstairs and looking, because I lived at home at the time, and looking into my parents' bedroom. They were both on the bed with iPads, looking at the news. And they were both pretty terrified about this idea of COVID and what was happening. And the fear was at an all-time high. But it didn't. I didn't lose sleep over COVID. I knew that we had a plan, or rather, we could divulge a plan to be able to get us through that storm. And And the reality is that you can only control what you can control. You can't control, the government telling you to stay inside and close your businesses. You can't control that, but you can control everything else. So you have to control what you can do and work your best to have that positive mindset, and shift some expectations around.
So I'd love to talk about that mindset a bit more, because there's a member who said to me some time ago, they said, Ronan, I don't do recessions. And I thought it was a really interesting mindset of positivity. I don't do recessions, right? As a first step. But if there is a recession, how can you not do it? Did they really mean, I'm not going to let a recession get in the way of the business's success? Is that what they really mean?
Yes. Yeah, you can't, because you can use it as an excuse for failure, or excuse for procrastination, or as an excuse to not do anything. You can't do that. You have to pretend the world is fine, and you got to keep your head down and do more work, because ultimately we can't afford to have a recession. We can't afford to have an economic recession, but at the same time a mentality recession and withdraw from the business. A recession is a time where you need to double down on your business, not withdraw from it. So mentally withdrawing, it'll just cause chaos for you.
What's really interesting on the subject of mindset, a post popped up on my Facebook newsfeed the other day with like 15 different like kind of tips or whatever, and 3 of them were really interesting and relevant to this. So number 4 was, no one is coming to save your problems. Your life is 100% your responsibility. I think that's very relevant. You got to take responsibility. It's something we talked about a lot of the time. Nobody is responsible for your success or failure other than yourself. Number 7, no one cares about you, so stop being shy. Go out and create your chances. And number 10, comfort is the worst addiction and cheap ticket to depression. So what that's telling me is, you're responsible for your outcomes. If you don't, success is on the other side of our comfort zone. We've always known that. We have to push ourselves to get better. And, you have to go out and create those opportunities. No one's going to do them for you. I think it's really relevant to the mindset discussion on tackling a recession as well.
It's the difference between finding solutions and finding the problems and only focusing on the problem. And we see it in every part of the experience where somebody is focused on whatever's blocking them, and all they see is the wall, and they just keep hitting the wall because that's all they see. They don't see what's behind the wall and coming up with a strategy on how they're going to get to the other side. And whether that's walking around, climbing over, or bursting straight through it. And there are those people that will just charge straight through it. Those people that are looking beyond the wall and determined to get there will find a way. But I think a lot of that mindset has to do with where your focus is. And that person who's saying I don't do recessions is already thinking about how he's going to get past that, and what are the actions he needs to take now to prepare and make it so it doesn't affect his business as much, which is great.
Yeah. Okay. So I want one tip from everybody as to how to survive through this silent recession.
Let's talk about how to thrive through it. Let's take it a step.
I prefer that. Thank you, Steve.
Because there were lots of businesses that are international. Apple started in the middle of a recession. Why can't we thrive?
I agree. That's probably coming from a past experience of, in the last major recession, losing a business. So my mindset is set for the negative. So I'm going to reframe it.
Well, you've learned from that now. You're ready to move on.
I have. Right? And we're going to thrive through this one. I know we are. So here we go.
I'm sorry. I was playing PlayStation 3 and you were losing a business. Oh, that's they're completely 2 different examples of up to the 2008 recession.
The funny thing is, like Jonathan mentioned, elsewhere, that you've got to take, what was the word you used, Jonathan? You have to accept responsibility for your outcome. And I don't blame the recession for losing that business. I blame myself for not having the cash reserves, right, to survive it. So, I like that, Jonathan. I think that is really key and important. You know, we can't point the finger at something else and say it's that fault. It's our fault, whatever happens, regardless of what happens, right? So, it's up to us to adopt the right mindset and to do whatever we need to thrive. Notice the change, Steve, to thrive through the silent recession.
I just love the way you said it.
So Ronan, go on. You give us the first tip then. Go on, lead the way.
The first tip. Well, you've already spoken about the first tip, which is I'm not going to do it, right? First of all, so have the right mindset. And the second thing is, I think you have to get yourself into a place where we've mentioned work harder. For me, it's how can we work smarter? So what are we doing that we can tweak to work better for the business and for us? And then just go and do it. And as you and Brad always say about let the market decide. Like, you just gotta figure out what you're gonna do, go do it, measure the results, tweak it, and go again. You know, whatever that might be. I think the need for it's always there, right? But as human beings, we're built. I think when I even look at myself, like, should always be looking at how you can work smarter and, you know, where's the areas that you can save money and all that. But it's funny, you know, that when things are flying, we're less focused on looking how to do things better and save money. Well, that's me anyway. That's been my experience always. It's funny that. But
it's in everything, Ronan. Whenever there's abundance, there's wastage. And it's only when there is a lack of abundance or there's scarcity that we begin to really tighten up and become efficient. So it's part of that abundance and wastage sort of mentality, I think, that we have, because we feel like there's a never-ending supply of whatever we need.
You fall victim to your own hubris. You know, God knows when you start spending money.
Sorry, go again?
It might. I said you fall victim to your own hubris, or I have in the past. Like, God knows when I've gone out and spent more money, or have felt that I'm successful and I can go out and spend more money, and then I get thrown some wonderful challenges. Like, it happens, you know, and in those instances, you shouldn't. I don't know. I say fall victim to success. You should look at ways that you can always be more, I suppose, lenient. You know, better on cash, creating better cash flow.
There's never a better time to start doing profit first than when you're in a silent recession or a recession.
Look at you providing value. We ask you for one tip, you give four.
Anyway, someone else's turn.
I think nurturing and focusing on building long-term relationships with clients and with your business partners, because that loyalty and that repeat business, the referrals, are the lifeblood of a business. And yes, we need new clients. We always need new clients. But really focusing on and thinking about how can I build a long-term relationship with this person, and fostering that, because through COVID, so many of the people that I was coaching had built those long-term relationships, and people were coming in and spending money on past shoots and supporting that business because of the loyalty that they've brought up. So is it when it gets tough, it's those relationships that are going to help you see you through it. I think it's important that you surround yourself with a community that is determined not to do the recession, and collectively will work together towards building and thriving through this, because while most businesses are going to cut back on their marketing, and we know it'll happen. Most photographers will cut back. For those that are still spending, it means that we will be more visible.
I'm going to go next for the tip before I let Brad go last, because Steve mentioned joining a community. So my tip is join the inner circle, because when you're a member of the inner circle, you are surrounding yourself with not only the tactics and strategies you need to get through this silent recession, to thrive through this silent recession, but you're surrounding yourself with a community of like-minded individuals who are going to help you get there. So click the link below and apply to join the inner circle. It's where you need to be to thrive through the silent recession. That's my tip.
I mean, technically I've got two. One's very unsexy though, and I've said it already. You just have to work damn hard. So you have to double your work. Whatever your work effort is right now, you have to double it or maybe triple it to get a result that's probably less than what you used to getting, and you have to be happy with it. So you have to work more and work harder, which I suppose isn't a really great tip that people want to hear. So my slightly more sexy tip is don't become a victim of pride, because you can be too proud to ask for help, or you can be too proud to try and do something different, or you can let your own pride get in the way of you fixing a problem. And I remember that 2008 recession, again, playing PlayStation 3 and Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I had a great time. But I also remember the conversations around the dinner table with my parents. And my parents never really argued, but loose disagreements they were having. Because instantly, when that recession happened, my mum got a job, or got a second job and got a second income. And ultimately didn't have that for long, because with the effort they put in the business, she didn't need it. But it was just instantly any notion of that, of having a job as well as a business that turned over multiple six figures, was anything beneath her or less than. It was, well, we don't know what's going to happen. I have to work more. I'm just going to get a job. She did the same during COVID. And again, when we had a business turn over multiple six figures and a substantial property portfolio, it's just, they've got that knee-jerk reaction to just go solve the problem and get the problem done. If that problem requires, I'll go get another job, or I'll get a part-time job on the side to ease this, because, the studio's closed Sundays, I'll go work Sunday. That's just the mentality that they had. So don't let pride get in the way of you taking action to keep your business open, or to keep your family provided for. And a big part of that, again, kind of links into asking for help. A lot of people don't like asking for help. You can ask for help. We do this podcast to give help for free. We have Inner Circle where you can pay us for help, which is always nice. But we have the Difference Maker Starter Group, which is a free group, which you can come on and actually jump on a call and ask all of us here questions and get help for free. So, get help, and don't be too prideful to ask for help.
Yeah, and it is a great time to reevaluate, what's really important. And that's why we say at the Difference Maker Revolution, come and join us and see what's involved with being a difference maker and using photography to make a difference to people, because that's where the true value is to your clients. And the result of that will be that you will have happier clients who will gladly spend money with you and send their friends to you too. So on that note, we've had our first podcast on the silent recession that none of us are doing. So we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later.
Ciao.